We've arrived at the final chapter of Stevenson's famous novella, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It is in this chapter that we finally get to hear from our protagonist himself. In his forthright confession, Dr. Jekyll reveals all about his scientific experiments, untamed desires, and unholy ambitions. On one hand, we learn of his firm beliefs, confirmed by his scientific endeavors, in the inherent duality of mankind and of his pride and excitement at his potential to be the first man to prove such a groundbreaking hypothesis. On the other, we gain an insight into the darker motivations that drove him to his drastic experimentation, from the morbid shame he felt for his internal desires, to the yearning to be free from the societal expectations which steadily crushed his spirit. Along the way, we will also dissect the link between violent repression and violent expression, and take a closer look at the feelings of liberty and lightness that come from indulging one's desires. This one's a bit of a lengthy one, but we've made it to the final hurdle, so now let's skip right on over it. In Chapter 10 of Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll delves into a profound introspection of his own character and life's journey. Born into privilege and gifted with intellect and ambition, Jekyll reflects on the dichotomy of respectability and depravity within himself, a duality that has long tormented him. Driven by scientific curiosity and a quest for transcendence, Jekyll delves into experiments that challenge the very nature of human identity. Through a meticulous process, he discovers a transformative potion that allows him to shed his moral constraints and embrace a darker, more primal aspect of his being, an aspect which manifests itself as the sinister Mr. Hyde. Despite the grotesque appearance of his alter ego, Jekyll finds a strange sense of liberation and authenticity in this newfound persona. Embracing his dual identity, he ventures into the night as Hyde, while retaining the guise of Henry Jekyll by day. He then begins to reflect on his experiments, acknowledging that had he approached his experiment with nobler intentions, the outcome might have been different. However, driven by ambition and with his virtue slumbering, he allowed his evil side to take over and indulged in monstrous activities. Despite occasional remorse, he finds himself unable to resist the temptation to transform into Hyde again and again. As time passes, Jekyll attempts to lead a virtuous life, but finds himself increasingly consumed by the desire to indulge his darker side. He ultimately succumbs to the temptation, leading to a tragic series of events culminating in murder. The horror of being Hyde and the fear of discovery torment him, leading him to make a desperate attempt to reconcile his dual nature. His efforts fail, however, and he realizes that his life as Jekyll is coming to an end. In a final act of resignation, Jekyll writes his confession, acknowledging that Hyde will likely destroy the document upon his next transformation. He accepts his fate, indifferent to whether Hyde dies on the scaffold or finds a way to escape. With a sense of fatalism, Jekyll brings his own life to an end, sealing the tragic tale of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. In his statement, Jekyll admits that as his experiments began to show signs of success, this sparked within him an ambition for fame and recognition. He is spurred on by the prospect of achieving historical, cultural, and societal fame through his groundbreaking discoveries, and by the idea that he may leave a lasting legacy within the world if he is conclusively able to transcend the limitations of human understanding. Such hopeful pride drives him to pursue his experiments with unwavering determination, a relentless pursuit of glory which ultimately proves to be his hubris. Ultimately, Stevenson uses this storyline to highlight the perils of ego-driven ambition and the importance of humility in the face of scientific discovery. In Chapter 10, Stevenson uses Jekyll's confession to explore the inherent duality of human nature, as represented by Jekyll and Hyde. Through Jekyll's introspection, Stevenson highlights the conflict between good and evil within the human psyche. Jekyll's belief that man is not truly one but truly two reflects the coexistence of opposing forces within individuals. Jekyll's experiences reveal that these forces are interdependent and that his identity is incomplete without both. His struggle to suppress his darker impulses underscores the complexity of human morality and the conflict between good and evil. Stevenson challenges readers to recognize that the capacity for both virtue and vice exists within everyone, questioning traditional notions of moral purity and inherent goodness. In Jekyll's full statement, Stevenson explores the consequences of repressing inner desires, as shown by Dr. Jekyll's attempts to suppress his darker impulses. Jekyll's commitment to strict moral discipline reflects Victorian societal expectations. However, this relentless repression intensifies his innate desires, causing inner turmoil. The transformation into Mr. Hyde, initially seen as liberation, unleashes unrestrained violence and depravity. Jekyll's moral degradation illustrates the dangers of denying one's true nature and the futility of forcefully subduing primal instincts. Stevenson suggests that violent suppression of inner desires leads to their powerful manifestation and catastrophic consequences. Through Jekyll's tragic narrative, Stevenson emphasizes the need to acknowledge and reconcile with one's darker impulses instead of suppressing them, to avoid even greater destruction. Jekyll's narrative highlights the feelings of lightness, liberty, and happiness that come from indulging one's desires, contrasting these with the repression of inner impulses. Dr. Jekyll's experiments with his transformative potion symbolize a break from societal expectations and moral conventions. The exhilaration and freedom of becoming Mr. Hyde suggests that indulging darker impulses provides temporary relief from guilt and self-restraint. Stevenson implies that the pursuit of pleasure and self-gratification offers fleeting euphoria, tempting individuals to give in to their base instincts, despite the steep ultimate cost of such indulgence. In Chapter 10, we see how rigid societal expectations and oppressive Christian morality profoundly impact Dr. Jekyll. These pressures drive his scientific ambitions and desire to split his identity. Stevenson portrays Jekyll as torn between his conscience and societal conformity, illustrating the deep influence of religious and moral norms on behavior. The minor sins for which Jekyll condemns himself cause him intense shame, revealing the limitations of strict moral codes in addressing human complexity. Jekyll's struggle critiques the oppressive nature of societal expectations and the inadequacy of traditional moral frameworks in understanding human psychology. Congratulations! We have now completed our chapter-by-chapter studies of the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Today, we have brought our study of the novella to a close, examining in earnest the profound complexities of human nature and the inexorable conflict between opposing forces within the human psyche. We have also investigated the fleeting euphoria and sense of liberation that accompany the uninhibited expression of one's darker impulses, juxtaposed against the profound shame and moral severity imposed by societal expectations and oppressive Christian morality. We have joined Jekyll on his emotional rollercoaster as he switches between elation and thoughts of global celebrity to bitter remorse at the violent outcomes of his selfish indulgences, a journey which Stevenson uses to warn of the dangers of violent repression and its ultimate consequence of violent expression. We have looked at the liberty that accompanies Jekyll's expression of his dark side and the oppressive nature of societal expectations. We have walked in Jekyll's shoes all the way to his early grave, learning, loathing, and lamenting along the way. But now, with the final nail in the coffin of both Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it is time to move on to some of the more technical aspects of the text. Join me in the next lesson for an insight into the literary form of Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.